Patrick.
Hi.
Welcome to the Canucks This Week video, brought to you by Woody's RV at woodysrv.com.
I'm excited to be here.
You should be.
Where are we
You should
driving
be.
this week?
So, I'm going to get to that in a second. We're going to do something new this week, and we're going to call it the Road Report, but you're going to have to wait and find out. woodysrv.com Road Report. But I do want to laud you because this time last week when we did a video, Canucks were winless, and I said, how many wins will they have in the next week? And you said 2. And they got them both back to back, Seattle and, of course,
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that was surprising. Like, it seems so long ago now. So congrats on that. Let's. I know you put some logic into it. How has the last week gone in terms of not just the results but the performance of the team in your eyes compared to how they started?
Well, I always make the joke that the safest thing to do is just don't make predictions. That whatever I don't think we did them this year. At least I wasn't asked. The post media sort of who's going to win what and what are the standings going to be. We didn't do that, and I breathed a sigh of relief because I don't think I've ever been very good on. I mean, who the good.
No one's ever really good at these. No one.
Yeah, that's the joke. But anyway, no, it was a couple things. It was, first of all, there's a certain element, especially in hockey, of expect the opposite, and so that certainly drove some of my thinking. We knew that obviously the Kraken are not a terribly skilled team, but they've had a good start to the season. We know the Penguins are a terribly skilled team. We also knew the Canucks were going to be coming home, having played the night before. Now, of course, going to Seattle isn't that far, but still playing 2 nights in a row is never easy. But I just sat back and looked at that, and I think when we talked, I was in, I don't remember what. I was at home, wasn't I? It was looking at that and just looking at then the Carolina game and not the Carolina game, New Jersey last night, but coming off the Carolina game, and just sort of, in the end, this team is 2-6-2 as we're speaking, and so that 10 games is a fair reflection. Do they deserve maybe 1 or 2 more wins? Sure. But it beggared belief that they would go essentially 0-10 to start the season. That as poor as they've been in spots, there have been moments they've done enough to have won a few games. The game in Columbus. I thought back a lot about Spencer Martin, what he said to me on Friday, but I thought back a lot in comparison how mad and frustrated he was after that game. He felt like he hurt his team. He should have given his team a chance to win that game. And then on Friday at home against Pittsburgh, he was, there's a guy that was very, very pumped to have performed the way he did to get his team a win in a game that they did deserve to win. They finally did have one of those games. They haven't had many of them, but I just looked at the schedule and said, out of the games coming up, they're going to win one they probably shouldn't win, and like realistically, they're going to win one they should win. I didn't know what the shakeout would be, but that was my thinking. And here we are. We're still looking at a team that is struggling to put full 60 minutes together, struggling a little bit on offense, is not as bad defensively as I think maybe we perceive them to be, but nonetheless have no margin for error.
Okay, well, let's get to that then. Goals for, they're, I don't even know if you call 19th place middling, but goals against, they're tied with Arizona for the third worst goals against. 4 goals a game, to be honest with you. They've given up 40 goals in 10 games. See, my math's really good there. It's just Columbus who've given up 44 in the same amount of games. And then Anaheim's given up 43. So you say defense, they're not as bad as they, as maybe we thought. Well, the numbers might suggest otherwise. Is it too simplistic to say it's overall poor defensively, or is sort of substandard goaltending juicing the numbers? So essentially, like, where do you point the finger? Team defense, the thin blue line, or goaltending?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to recognize how bad the penalty killing has been, because if you strip that away, they've given up, per game, they're sort of middle of the pack. They're 14th fewest goals against per 60 minutes of even straight time. 5-on-5, which is, that's middle of the pack. The story has been, that they can't kill penalties. They have given up 11 goals, 12 goals. I've lost track. More than a goal per game on the penalty kill, and that's
Worst
just
in the league.
worst in the
Easy.
league. Second year in a row we're seeing this struggles. As a side note, it's been mentioned, and I think I've mentioned it, but it hasn't been talked about. Bradshaw was a big loss for this coaching staff, no matter who is still here. But Bradshaw did a huge effort with this penalty kill last year, turned them around, made some really smart decisions. Obviously, the impact of Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson was big, but we're seeing a group that's struggling without the guy that was there for their success. So I do think, first of all, that's a big part of the story. Defensively, they haven't been an unending tire fire, but if you look at the New Jersey game, as I noted in my game story, there was the first 1, 2, 3, 4 goals before the empty netter. Quinn Hughes literally lays out the error on each one of the goals, which reminds you what an astounding hockey mind is. Here's a guy who literally can relay what happened, not just on the goal that he felt he was at fault for, but essentially saying, here's what went wrong, here's what went wrong, here's what went wrong. And maybe one of those saves, there's the rebound goal on Michael McLeod where he spills the puck. You think maybe he'd like to keep that, sure, but the other 3 goals he didn't have a chance. There's the 2-on-1 that the chances of that goal not being in are very, very low. The NHL players score on those shots all the time. It just was not. It was an overall okay performance, but in the end, there are those bumps, and the bumps are the ones that end up killing you. And that's been the story too often for the Canucks, is that they're, every game there's something that goes awry. Every game it's something different, and the consistency factor is there. You find yourself wondering, are they? I asked Bruce Boudreau on Tuesday night, are you getting enough consistency in practice? Because he's talked about lacking consistency in games, and he said, no, I feel like we're working hard enough at practice, but it's not applying itself in games. So I don't know what the disconnect, he said himself says, I don't know what the disconnect is. But at the end of the day, this is a team that's being hurt by its penalty kill. Thatcher Demko has, in the end, his save percentage is way below where we would expect it to be. And they're not necessarily losing because of him, but they're certainly, the fact they're not winning he is part of the story.
It is astounding. Sorry,
yeah,
Patrick, it is astounding. Like you do, your weekly fancy stats column. We call them that just because we like to make fun of them. But if you look at the Bruins, the best penalty kill in the league, 94.6%. So literally, again, I got into journalism because I was terrible at math. But that's, every 10 penalties they take, less than 1 penalty, they're giving up a goal. And if you look at the Canucks, they're a flat 60%. So for every 10 penalties, they're giving up 4 goals. Like that's massive when you compare the standard in the league. If they were to be able to fix their penalty kill, do you feel this team can compete for a playoff spot?
I think so. I mean, the other factor here, and it's something I was literally working on before this video. I think there are some worries about their 5-on-5 offense. They're not scoring at a very high rate at all. The power play is bumping along. Their power play has actually kept them in games. But you look again at the New Jersey game. Bo Horvat scores 2 goals, probably could have had 2 more. Elias Pettersson's line has been making stuff happen, and on the whole has been pretty good. But there's just nothing else happening, right? Like even Horvat, he's playing with JT Miller, and I'm sure that's helping Horvat's finishing to some degree because Miller is such a good passer. But Miller has been mostly, he amazingly is almost a point per game player, and yet he feels like he's been mostly invisible. And it's just there's not enough happening beyond that. The defense has actually put up a decent number of points. But again, I mentioned this elsewhere. Cam Charron is doing a great job tracking this stuff, and he's just saying there's nothing being created on the back end. And you watch it, and you can watch the game. You literally watch the game. Last night against New Jersey, their one really quality chance from the defense was Oliver Ekman-Larsson, of all people, who's been being a very cautious game. And I think that knee, I don't think it's a day-to-day soreness or throbbing, but you can just see his mobility is reduced. But he was the one guy who had that big chance. We've seen a couple times where Luke Schenn has thrown the puck at the net smartly. They've got some tips. He's helped set up some goals. Quinn Hughes, before he was out, was making things happen. but he's only just returned to the lineup. But Quinn Hughes really has been the only player consistently creating stuff offensively, and the problem, that is a problem. You need more to happen from your back end, and the Canucks just don't have enough of that right now. And in the end, that is, as the season carries on, and this is something that Bruce Boudreau mentioned the other day. Like, I asked him a bit about sort of how you build out your season. And, he says, teams spend the first 10, 15 games of the season figuring themselves out. But they're also figuring out how other teams are going. And, in the end, if this is a team that is as limited as they've proven to be in terms of getting the puck up the ice, creating sustained offense, it's not just about how, whether you can dump the puck and retrieve it, because the Canucks actually aren't bad at that. It's what you do after you get the puck. And the Canucks have struggled to sustain attacking stretches in the attacking zone, and a lot of that comes back to their defense. And that's something that teams are going to be easily going to be able to scout out. And that offense that has struggled as much as it has at 5-on-5 could just evaporate, and then you really are nowhere.
I was thinking about this a little bit, and this is really a nightmare scenario for a fan, because if you look at last year, they got off to a bad start, clearly. And then, they make the coaching change, which spurred on something, obviously.
Sure.
And, we'd seen the stats. They'd played at the clip of the 6th best record in the NHL after Boudreau took over. So, assuming that something massive doesn't happen, whether it's another coaching change, whether it's a big trade, to spur on the same kind of reaction, it's almost like the season is over already. Yeah. Like, if you're a Canuck fan and you've got season tickets, when I see people, the media can be, you're on the front lines of this, you'd be, tagged by some fans as being overly negative and always looking for, the black cloud, so to speak. But that, and I saw people sort of projecting what point pace they'd have to play at after losing, only getting 2 loser points on that opening road trip. But, okay, they get the 2 wins. Now they get thumped again. If they go, if they lose like 3 of the next 4, it really is looking like it would be almost impossible to make the playoffs. And I know that sounds ridiculous to say with, an eighth of the season played pretty much, but I don't see what would spur it around to make this team then play at such an elevated level. Like, can you offer any hope to Canuck fans that look, yeah, they've had a terrible start, but it's still early? Like, I'm just wondering, like, how this team could then turn around and start winning, like, 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 in each chunk of the season.
Well, I mean, even you look at they've got 10 games till American Thanksgiving. Right? I mean, they're going to need to play essentially, really, realistically, they've got to be a 500 team by that point, right? Like,
yeah,
at the very least. And generally the teams that are in the playoffs at that point of the season are the teams in the playoffs at the end of the season. There's, 1 or 2 teams sometimes that bump around. So this is a big 10 games coming up. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And, they're going to need to win something like 7 of the 10, as you kind of joking about. I mean, that's literally what they're going to have to do. They need to come out of this at least 4 games up, because they're 4 games out, right? Like, that's the thing. Even if you just set 500, let alone get into the playoff bars, the standard.
Well, that's right. You got to do that just to get back to get your head above water.
Yeah. So, is it possible? Sure. Like, they're playing some opponents coming up here, that are not, that are, at least, I suppose the way to put it, as flawed as they are, right? They're not sort of locks to be top teams that are in the NHL, but in the end, they're teams that the Canucks have to beat if they're going to be a playoff team.
Okay. So,
and I would flip that around. What I was going to say was, I would flip it around. Like, I would say literally what I said in the last answer, which is that they've got to sort their offense out. They've got the talent there. You'd think that they could do more than they've been doing. And is that, or at least you think they've got the talent there. And that, to me, is it. That's exactly what we need to be watching the next 10 games. I think they're going to defend well enough. Anaheim, they should get better goaltending, but they just need to score more.
So Anaheim, Nashville, Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Boston, Buffalo, the Kings, Vegas, and the Avalanche are their next 10. Yeah. You see 5 wins in there?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be. Like, you could I see them? Sure. I mean, like I said last, part of my rationale last week is you kind of go, they're not going to lose every game they should lose, and they're not going to win every game they should win. Are they a 500 team? I think so, but is that enough? I don't know. Are there 5 wins? Yeah, I can believe there would be 5 wins in there. the challenge is that 5-game road trip. Obviously, they're playing, they play the Senators, they play the Habs. The Habs aren't great. The Senators are fun and exciting, but they're still, I think, the Senators. The Leafs at home is never easy, but then again, the Leafs have been reeling. That back-to-back going to Boston is going to be tough. I mean, that's what, is that your 4 and 5, 4 and 6? Like that's a tough one. There's going to be, I don't know what their plans are around the Hall of Fame, but obviously the Hall of Fame inductions that Monday night. There'll be a fair bit of hoopla around the team anyway. That's a tough one. And then they get to come home and they get a little bit of a respite. Like obviously they play the Kings and they play Vegas, and those two games have 3 days in between. So the Kings game is 3 days after they play Buffalo. The Knights game is 3 days after they play the Kings. They get a little bit of a break there. But then you go to Colorado. I mean, of course, remember they won that game last year in Colorado that no one thought they were going to win.
Yeah, apparently someone was leaving the stadium and fans said to them they were terrified of playing the Canucks in the playoffs.
Yeah, so I mean, it's
big steps, guy.
We'll see, right? But nothing is obvious. But in the end, yeah. But I mean, even that you get 5 wins there, you're still if you say you go 5-3-2, you're still under 500 on the season, and that's just not a place you want to be.
Nothing is obvious except every week I ask you who's been the Canucks' best player and who's been their worst, and you always say Elias Pettersson's the best and JT Miller's been the worst, like versus expectations. So I am going to change it up. I'm going to throw 5 names at you, and I want you to give me the first name that comes or the first word that comes to mind in terms of their performance, and just elaborate on a little bit. All right?
Sure. Okay.
Bo Horvat.
I mean, people for so often I think get focused on what he can't do. But in this case, we really need to focus on what he is doing. And he is scoring goals. He is dragging his team into the fight. He is a guy that has worked really hard. He's not the loudest leader necessarily, but he is a guy who really takes it personally in terms of how to make himself better, how to work extra in practice, how to be that sort of role model that he saw in the Sedins, that the Sedins saw in Marcus Naslund, that Marcus Naslund saw in Mark Messier. Oh gosh, did I just say that? But there is a continuum there of getting it done, making yourself better. I mean, Horvat, the knock on him was his skating, and now look at what a powerful skater he is. And he's switched sticks. He's got 8 goals in 10 games, and really you don't think of any of them as being a fluke. So there's a guy that's doing what he can to make this team better.
Brock Boeser.
It's hard to say because I am a big Brock Boeser guy, but elusive, and obviously dealing with whatever this injury is that no one seems to really be sure about. And a guy that, I mean, we're talking about the team needing more offense, and here's a guy, obviously that looks like for now he's lost his spot on the top 2 lines, so he needs to find a role on the 3rd line. A guy that wants to score 30 goals, who actually does a lot of good stuff away from the puck, can be a creative player, but started the season from behind, was starting to find a groove, then got hurt again, which in the end, if we look at his career record, he's never played a full season in the NHL, so it was no surprise that he was out. Maybe there's an element of load management, I guess, but a guy that in the end what is there, but you just need to see more, and you need to see more of it consistently.
Todd Colson.
He's had a tough patch. I had a chat with him last week. I haven't really found a way to kind of crowbar it into anything, but I talked to him a little bit last week. There was that fun on Friday night. Obviously there's the fun chat with the media that Andrei Kuzmenko had, and that Todd Colson serves as a translator for. And I kind of cornered him after that and said, "How are you feeling?" And he says, "Not good. He's not happy with how he's playing. He knows that he needs to do more. He recognizes that, he's a guy. He says, I'll do whatever role is asked of me, but he is not happy with how he's performed in that role. And similar to Horvat, he's a guy who's obsessed with making himself better, perhaps too hard on himself. I asked him if he's a bit too hard on himself. He actually kind of admitted maybe he is. But he's a young player. He's trying to find his way. He's trying to find his groove, find out who he's going to be, whether that's, as a calm guy, a loud guy, what have you. But a player certainly who remains a work in progress, but certainly I think has the right mentality to make himself better.
Luke Schenn.
I mean, everybody loves Daddy Schenn, right? The guy plays so hard, cares so much about sort of his team. We saw he did lose it a little bit maybe in that fight on Tuesday night. I'm not obviously a huge fan of fighting myself. I understand why it happens. It's an emotional game, and he was feeling emotional. He had thrown a couple kind of borderline hits and drew the attention. But that just shows you, in many ways, I think it does show you the sort of energy he's trying to bring to this team. And he's actually, we're recording this November 2nd. It's his birthday. He's 33 today. And he's playing well. I mean, he's a player. I wrote about this before. He's a guy that has recognized that if he wanted to stay in the NHL, he had to learn more. He had to learn how to play the game a new way, and he's made that work. And in the end, he's not obviously the smoothest puck handler. He's not there to score points, but he's picked up some points, and all of them been deserved. He's trying to make an impact every time he's on the ice.
And lastly, Thatcher Demko.
It's been a tough start. He was asked for after Tuesday's game, didn't come to talk to us. Part of me imagines that. I wrote it in the story, was maybe he just didn't want to talk about what he knew what we were going to bring up, was, is he getting enough help in front of him? And there's a guy who's frustrated right now. He performed so well last year. Obviously he has made that his brand, that he is the guy that you lean on, that is going to be so reliable and so solid that we almost don't talk about how bad the defense has been in front of him. Like, that was some of the story last year, was that you kind of forgot about it because he was so good. But here we are, and he's been struggling, certainly not statistically putting up the numbers he would like. A large part of that, every goalie will tell you that every goal is stoppable no matter what happens in front of them. Of course, those of us who stand aside and look from the outside will say, well, what happens in front of you does matter. But in the end, he's a guy that won't be happy with his performance right now, and the Canucks need him to be better.
So 4 games in between now and when we will likely record another video. Anaheim, Nashville at home, Ottawa, Montreal back-to-back on the road. How many wins out of those 4?
I'm played safe, say 2 again. I think
excellent.
I could say 3 if I was really optimistic. They certainly need 3.
Well, what have they shown you to make you optimistic,
exactly.
though? That's
exactly. Yeah. In the end, like I said, the scoring is the question, and if we see some scoring, then they'll have 3 wins.
Yeah, got to figure out that penalty kill too. So we'll finish up here. The Woody's RV Road Report. I have to say, I know I'm trying to be the good worker here and support our sponsors. I was looking at some of their motorhomes. You can get some for like 18 grand. There's one called a 2022 Discovery, 489,000, Patrick. Now, we could do some road trips on that. So we'll call this every week. We're going to do this now, the Road Report. The 2 road games this week, we talked about Ottawa and Montreal. Tell me something fun about either of those cities. Pick one that you've done. I'm trying to tap into your experience on the road as a hockey writer. Well, it doesn't have to have been a hockey trip.
Sorry, what is Montreal?
Ottawa or Montreal? Just tell me something fun about one of those 2 cities. Which of the 2 do you prefer to go to, and why?
Well, Montreal, obviously. Well, Schwartz's Deli, if you're into smoked meats. I know you're not into smoked meats, so I don't know what to suggest, but there are lots of good places to eat. There's a good karaoke bar in the East End called Astra 2000. We went there at the draft. That was quite the good place.
Karaoke bars in Montreal. Well done.
Well, I think
we all know
who would have gone to different bars in the old days.
Yeah,
Tony Gallagher would have gone to a different bar, I think. But we'll see. But Montreal's a great time. Ottawa, I know some people there, so they've taken me to some nice places there. But Ottawa is obviously a bit of a quieter spot, shall we say?
Yeah.
And you have to stay so far out of town, because the smart move, if you're going to go to a game in Canada, is there's 2 hotels down the street. So you stay there, which keeps you out of town, which is annoying, but at least it's when it snows after the game, you're not fighting to get yourself safely home. So.
Oh, and we're getting into that season. They're calling for snow here next week. I know Calgary got hit pretty hard.
Yeah.
And when you got those back-to-backs, it's not easy being on the road. Patty J on the road. Patrick's
Yeah.
Instagram if you want to check it out.
Not on the next one. Hughes is on the next trip. But
All right. Well, thanks for this, Patrick. Thanks to Woody's, woodysrv.com. We'll see what the next week holds in terms of the Canucks and wins, losses, goals, what have you. Thanks, Patrick.
Take care, Paul.